laws on buying and carrying acid are to be reviewed by the government following a spate of attacks which took place in London on Thursday night.
Now, would you know what to do if you were faced with a victim of an acid attack?
The moments after an acid attack.
Acid attacks.
Of an acid attack.
An acid attack.
London, the nation's capital. A city with tall buildings, bright lights, and an even brighter future. But amongst all this positivity, we've seen an increase in a relatively new form of crime in the UK, acid attacks. The use of acid in violent attacks has gone up 78% in London in the last 2 years. In 2015, there were 260 incidents involving acid, whereas in 2017, there were 465. These statistics pose a lot of questions to researchers. For example, what factors contribute to this barbaric crime being on the rise, and what can be done to stop it? These are just some of the questions that we're going to look into today and attempt to find some answers. We've managed to get hold of youth worker and ex-gang member Jermaine Lawler to help us do so. He's agreed to let us ask him some questions so we can learn more about the subject matter. Firstly, I asked him what factors contribute to the increased statistics in acid attacks in the UK. Here's what he had to say.
There are multiple factors that contribute to the increase in statistics, one of them being social disorganisation, where we're seeing large groups of males predominantly coming from ethnic minority communities, coming from social deprivation, coming from areas of poverty, also lack of role models. It's easy to access acid, which makes it a number one choice weapon for young criminals. It also causes great amounts of damage psychologically, emotionally to a person that they have to live with those consequences year in, year out.
The next question I asked was, why are people using acid over other types of weapons such as knives or guns? Here's what he had to say.
Easy to conceal, which means that you can have it in a Lucozade bottle, you can have it in a sports bottle, and you could be stopped and searched by the police, and it means that you're not going to be able to find it. As I said, the consequences psychologically are much more greater than that of a knife and a gun if you live from obviously a gun attack. But with acid, you're more likely to live. There's 9 times out of 10 chance you're going to live, but be left with great scarring tissue, which has great psychological effects to a person, which affects their relationships, their self-esteem, their confidence, and utterly destroys their world.
Next, I asked Jermaine if he thinks there should be harsher punishments for people who carry and use acid.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it's very hard to prove because of, firstly, we have many failures in our criminal justice system for multiple factors, one of them being overrepresentation, underfunding cuts. And we know that justice is never served. We also know that it's very hard to catch a perpetrator who's used acid for DNA traces, and it's also because of the distance that a perpetrator can actually have upon his enemy, which allows him to actually get away efficiently without being traced to court.
The final question I asked is, what measures can we take as a society in order to stop this horrific crime from increasing anymore?
We need to fund organisations that work predominantly with perpetrators and victims, that work in the community with these individuals and these families, so they can continue to do work in terms of uplifting, rebuilding, restructuring, and providing opportunities, lifelong opportunities. We need more funding in these communities where we see that poverty strife, because these are where a lot of the individuals are striving from, broke, run down, torn down buildings, government infested estates, in terms of poverty, in terms of deprivation, in terms of lack of resources, lack of employment. We need refunding, we need new leaders, we need a community together approach to tackle this problem that is on the rise and will continue to rise. We need regulations amongst our DIY shops, our building shops, regulations on distribution and selling. We need to look at the whole scope and take an holistic approach in terms of tackling the problem. We also need to ask the questions of why have these individuals been made to feel like they can even attempt to do this, and why are they so vulnerable in terms of doing that, and what can we do to better their lives?
The main few reasons why acid attack statistics are on the rise in the UK, according to Jermaine Lawler, is social disorganisation and deprivation, lack of role models, and the fact that acid is so easily accessible. However, there are ways that we can decrease these statistics, according to Jermaine Lawler. These ways are by funding organisations that work with victims and perpetrators, electing new political leaders, and creating harsher rules and regulations on distributors of acid. It is definitely an ongoing issue, but there are ways that we can decrease the amount of acid attacks, create a better future for ourselves and our communities.